Hey, welcome everybody to Pro Mindset Podcast. This is your host, Craig Domann. Today we have a politician in the house. This gentleman is by way of, I would call him, he's from Jersey, but I'm going to call him a Philly guy because that's where my brain is in South Jersey. Peter DelBorrello. Peter, welcome to Pro Mindset.
Craig, how are you? Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate you.
Okay. So, being a politician is about as popular as being like a police officer a few years back. What is your perspective, and how do you, like, when you wake up in the morning and you're like being fired up about what you're doing and the people that you're serving, how do you deal with that when there's so much noise about politics right now?
Yeah, first of all, Craig, it's the way you say that is so true. I mean, people think of a politician as such a dirty word, but it doesn't have to be. There's actually great ones on both sides. And I've had the honor and pleasure to work with people on both sides. And I could tell you that firsthand. There's bad ones, right? Like anything else. But I think you have to wake up every day with the idea of three things: service, service, service. I wake up every day and I realize that my constituents need things, and I put everything else aside. And I always try to explain to them is I'm not trying to change their mind. I'm not trying to change or influence their vote. I'm trying to work for them, trying to meet them where they are. And, sometimes people start off with the first thing they say to me is, listen, I didn't vote for you, but I need help. It doesn't change how I'm going to help you. I'm still going to help you. It starts awkward when you start like that, but it doesn't matter to me. My job doesn't change. My job is still to serve you, no matter if you vote for me or not.
Okay. So that's kind of a new twist. I think from my perspective, just from the public's perspective, it seems like the politicians are just looking for votes. They want the prestige of being in the office. They want the power, but I don't really get that warm, fuzzy feeling, at least in Colorado, that the politicians are actually working for the people.
Well, there's a lot that aren't, and that's really the problem. You have a lot of noise. What you have on both sides right now, you have a lot of extremism, and that extremism is being the loudest voice because 70% of Americans agree on some of these top issues that really matter to people. And I think the problem is that you can't allow your politicians to only come out during election time. You need to see your politicians. No lie to you, I went to 3 or 4 events just yesterday alone. So in a given week, I can hit 15 or 20 events. I was at an event which would be right up your alley with Nick Foles on Friday night. So there's all these events to go to. People need to know. And from those events, right, these galas to the events where they're veterans events I went to yesterday or kids football games, you need to be seen all the time. People need to know they can get a hold of you. And it's not just through Monday through Friday or through an email or through they have to have your number. And I any social media that I do, I always give out my direct number. I always tell people to contact me, email me, text me, however you feel most comfortable, but they know that they can get a hold of me. And it literally is 20.
Okay. So Peter, what's the deal with your uniform? We've met out in California. You got the red tie, you see how casual I am.
Yeah.
You got the white shirt, you got the American flag pen. What's your uniform?
So, well, first of all, let's just say I put my dry cleaner's kids through college. So I've always dressed like this. I changed it up a little bit, right, to make sure that it looked more political. And this is the political look. But I do consider it my uniform. I put it on 7 days a week. You could ask my wife. I wear this 7 days a week. I want people to know who I am. It is a little bit of marketing, so they know who you are. They can recognize you. They know you're somebody. They know that they know you from somewhere. I do a lot of social media, which is now really big in the political world. It wasn't when I first started, but now it's huge. And that's how I connect with constituents on an everyday basis. You can reach out to me, but I let them know what's going on, events that are happening, where I've been, where I'm going to be, where they need me. So that's the big thing. But this is how my look is 7 days a week. I've always dressed like this since I was 7. I just changed the color of the tie.
Okay. So I don't want to go too far down this political road, but I got to ask you one question that has to do with politics. What do you stand for that you believe that when other people see what you can do in that area, whatever area that is, you won't be where you're at the end of this term? You'll continue to move up the political ladder, so to speak, to different and higher levels, because not necessarily because you're the best looking or the smartest, you got the best, you got a Harvard law degree or anything like that. What you stand for. What do you stand for?
First thing I stand for is I stand for our American flag. And I always tell people, listen, the only time I kneel is before Almighty God. And I think what I stand for every single day is to be the voice of the people who don't have one. People think every single day that their politicians don't think they matter. And a lot of places they don't. It is only about elections. I think I stand for those people each and every single day. I think I try to meet them where they're at. You can find me at food banks. You can find me ringing the bell. I have the only record for the Salvation Army of a person getting their finger stuck inside of my bucket. So I'm very proud of that record for the Salvation Army. But you can find me always giving back. And I think that's what separates me from other people. You can find me at different house of worships. So it's important to me to know where my constituents worship and what they find important. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, I was at a Diwali event with over 5,000 people celebrating. So it's very important for me to meet them where they're at, to find out where they're at in their lives. And that's what I think I stand for. I stand for our first responders. I stand for our police officers. I stand for teachers. I don't let people influence my decisions. I make my own decisions. I've said some things that I think some people, even a lot of our school boards, I don't like in the direction that we're going. I stand for parents. I want parents to know what's happening inside of our schools. It's their children. They need to be a part of that. They need to know what's happening with their children. I'm a father of 4 amazing children, so I understand that firsthand. And I'm willing to listen to anybody that's willing to have those conversations. But that's what I think I stand for.
That's awesome. You don't stand for something, you stand, it's very difficult in leadership, regardless whether it's politics or business or sports. You don't know what your leader stands for. Very difficult for people to follow that person.
Craig, I so agree with you. And that's what we have today. And then we were talking about earlier is that a lot of these politics have become political theater. They want to play to their base. I don't play to a base. I actually want to serve everybody. People ask me all the time, what party are you? Well, you're only a party on a ballot. And then you really have to represent everybody or you can't do your job effectively. I have to work with everybody because I have leaders on both sides in both parties. So at those different levels, I need them to work with me because I need to get things done for people. I put the politics aside because that's why people become so disenfranchised. They're tired of that. They're tired of those negative ads. Unfortunately, it happens every single year. We see it. There's billions of dollars that's spent on this. We have a big governor's race right now, and these guys are spending billions of dollars on trying to win. So you have to say to yourself, when people spend this kind of money, what kind of power can come with that job? So, and again, the other thing I think that you really have to do is you can't tell people who they need to vote for. I really do very few endorsements of any candidates. I really let people make their own decisions. I think that's what candidate represents you is what's most important to me.
Okay, let's jump and dive right in head first.
All right, let's do it.
Your brother was on and did an interview and we talked about the family business. Why don't you assume that somebody listening hasn't heard that conversation? Why don't you kind of set the stage for your family business and what happened?
Yeah, so I'm actually third generation of a family business. It was our grandfather and then our father and then my brother and I. And we were in a business. We were in alternative financial services. So we did a lot with check cashing. We had pawn shops. We really had built a company. When I say we, really my father, my grandfather, and my uncle had really built a company. That company ended up stretching almost 150 locations over almost 15 states. So in the early years when we were growing up, our father worked a lot. And we were kind of home with our mom. Our mom did a great job of letting us know that our father was working for us. He wasn't doing it for himself. So we kind of grew up in the industry. When we were old enough to reach the counter, you were there working. Whether you're pushing a broom, you were doing something. There was no grass growing under our feet in our house. My father felt hard work was really important. So did my grandfather, so did my uncle. So it was something that was really important. It was something that was taught in our family. That, you get up, you go to work every day, you work hard, you provide for your family. So we were taught that. As time went on and we kind of figured out what we wanted to do, that was the other thing too, is our parents were really great about what we wanted to do, where we wanted to go. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always felt like business was important to me. So over time, what I did was I created companies that were kind of sister companies of what I knew. So that same client base, same kind of customer base, it seemed like they really know that pretty well. So we started a venture capital company and we started investing more into these businesses. And as time went on, we have an older brother who was involved in the business, and we kind of went our different ways in these sectors, right? So he ran one piece of it. My brother Chris was going to school to be a doctor, which is always nice, right? And had the handwriting for it as well. So he was going to be a doctor. And I was running these different divisions of our company. And, over time, you're doing your thing. You're a family. We're an Italian family. So we try to spend Sundays together. We always had that rule, no business at the table. But Craig, that's Italian families, which I think I said to you before. It is gravy. It is not sauce. I just want to be on the record for that. I think that's one of the most important things that I tell people. But we would spend a lot of time together as a family. We had started this division where we were buying real estate. We thought real estate was really, especially the Philadelphia market, really seemed like it was going to take off. So we had started buying real estate. And that's what I was kind of taking up a lot of my time, because if you know anybody in that business, it's tough. And it's tough. We were buying both commercial real estate, and also residential. We had a lot of mixed use properties. So sometimes you have a lot of issues with that. So it was taking up a lot of my time. I wasn't involved in politics or anything like that. I only had one son at the time. So, just like any other day starts, I think it was actually May 16th, 2016. And, I'm trying to convince my wife. I know you kind of heard this, but I was trying to convince my wife to go with me to go look at this new property. And I'm a kind of person, though, I take a lot of phone calls. I get a lot of phone calls. So she was not interested in taking that ride with me that day, but I did have to make some deals with her. And like I said, I consider myself a pretty good negotiator, but that was a really tough negotiation. But we went out and looked at this property. It really was a nice new property that we just purchased. It was a mixed use property. And afterwards, we were going to have lunch. And while we're having lunch, I got a phone call. And the phone call was from a business associate. And he said, listen, I don't know how to tell you this. He said, but I think your brother's embezzling from your company. And Craig, I got to be honest, it's one of those moments that you kind of pull your cell phone away and you look at it and you really can't comprehend what that person's saying. Because like now you're just in this world, this person has just dropped this thing on you that you never thought. My oldest brother and I were extremely close. I was the best man at his wedding. So it's not something, I'm a godfather to his children. So it's not something I ever thought I'd hear on the other side of the phone. But to be completely honest with you, things start clicking in your mind. Things start that you thought were odd at the time that maybe you let go because it's your brother or their behavior or things that they did, you kind of let go. It all starts to click. So
I just want to interject something there.
Yeah.
Give you a chance to take a breath. It's almost like putting on prescription lenses.
Yeah.
Or glasses. And you saw certain things, but you didn't know how it all fit together. And then you go to the eye doctor and they give you the corrective lenses or glasses, whatever it may be. And it's like, shoot, this is easy. This now makes sense. Okay, continue.
Yeah. So Craig, you're absolutely right. And that's really what it was like. So my wife could tell. She already had called the waitress over and told her that we're going to get our food to go. And I think I could still get choked up thinking about it, but I don't think we said anything the whole ride home. And it's really odd for me to be like that. First, as being a politician and just being in business in general, it's not odd for me to not be able to say anything or have any words. And I remember, vividly, like literally pulling off our driveway and saying to her, hey, listen, I'm not going to be home tonight for dinner. And her saying, yeah, I know. And I remember saying something like, our lives are never going to be the same. And she said, I know. And I said, I love you. She said, I know. And it just, from that moment on, I knew that my life had completely changed. I knew that what life as I had known it was never going to be the same on so many levels. And people say, well, the anger, where does all that come in? All those emotions come to mind, not right away, right? Not right away that those come to mind, but they will come and they will be part of this journey. So you will have those moments that you're really, really angry. You'll have all those emotions. Get in the car, turn back around, drive back to Philadelphia. That's where our corporate office was, and head into the room where we keep all our records and just start opening up things and start looking at things and realizing at that moment that I realized that moment that my life had completely changed. I mean, we were not, I think, rich by any stretch, but we were not struggling at all. We had a great life. My wife and I, we had really had built, we were wanting to have more children, but as you're looking these things over, that everything in your life was going to do, a 180, and it was going to completely change. And you knew that the relationships that you had, that you thought were solid, that you thought were the cornerstone of your life, were never going to be the same again. And they haven't been. So, for anybody listening that thinks that these family issues just kind of go away, they don't.
How old was your oldest when that happened?
So my oldest boy at the time was, let me see, he was just around probably he was probably 6 years old at that point. Yeah.
So to kind of paint the picture, to make sure everybody gets the drift here, you got 3 brothers that are privy to an organization, 2 of which are working in it. One of them is going to med school.
Yeah.
Fair? Okay. So Chris was going to med school. And then one of the brothers is watching the books.
Yeah.
Cooking the books.
Yeah.
So what was the fallout? What was the fallout from his behavior after that? Because there's multitudes of fallouts. Let me give you 3 options.
Yeah.
Talk about all 3 if you want. The relationship in the family, like between the brothers, and even the cousins, your kids with his. So family's number 1. Number 2 is like legal liability, like getting getting served with papers saying that you owe money, or you're tied into something that you didn't even know you were tied into.
Yeah.
And then the third one is just pure cash. Thought you had this and it wasn't there. Go for it.
So all three come into play in this story, and I wish that they didn't, but they did. So the first one is the family fallout. That's not the initial one. The initial one is the financial, because the family at that point is, don't forget, his son and my son were close. I was close with his wife and his other children. Like I said, I was godfather to his children and best man at his wedding. So at first, you're all trying to figure it out together. And I think over time, people start to kind of take sides maybe, or you start to look at them a little bit differently. They look at you a little bit differently, because now things are starting to come to light and you're starting to say to yourself, wait a minute, how did we get here? What got here? Then the first thing is the financial part. You know that number one, you have a company to run, right? You have employees. We call them team members. So we had team members. We had a lot of liabilities. We had real estate. We had mortgages. You have all of those things. So you're thinking to yourself, where do we go from here? And then you realize basically, Craig, we were broke. We had nothing. When I mean nothing, we had nothing. We were actually negative. And then you have to start making these calls to business associates and finding out, by chance, do you owe them money? Is there a chance that you possibly could owe them? And as you start making these calls, you find out you do. And we owed out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and millions of dollars was missing. So you're like, wow, like, where do we go from here? I think it's that now you're trying to think too in your organization, who else was in on this, right? So who else may have known? What did they know? When did they know it? And you got to be careful too, because like you're saying with that liability, is you can't just start accusing people, right? You can't go on a tear and start letting everybody go either, because you need to know what they know. I wasn't part of those day-to-day transactions for that organization, so I didn't know some of the key people that worked on that and that division every single day. So you don't know what you don't know. And then you have to start making really hard decisions. And those really hard decisions, and those days and nights are long and they're dark. And you spend a lot of time trying to not go backwards, but go forwards. But I think the human psyche sometimes does that, Craig. I think it takes you back to say, why didn't I see this then? Or why didn't I see this? Or why didn't that stand out to me? So I think that's where you have to, anybody listening that's going through this has to really say to themselves, okay, don't worry about going backwards. You'll go there. You will go there. Right? But look forward first. Look forward, because you have to solve what's in front of you first. You can go backwards, but not yet.
Before we move forward, now that you've had roughly, 9.5 years since this episode, when you psychoanalyze your brother, what was the driver for him? Because when I talked to your brother, Chris, we never talked about this, but I'm just curious, because you got same DNA, same parents. What happened? What happened to him that put him in a position? Was it to keep his wife happy? Was it to live a lifestyle? What was the driver for him? Because everybody, to do something like that to your own family, the driver's got to be more important in his mind, has to be more important than the family at that point in time. Otherwise, he wouldn't have did it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one of the things was Tommy and Chris and I, Tommy was actually our half brother. So my mother had been married previously. It did not work out with her first husband. She met my father. My father adopted him. And, there had been some things in his past that we thought may have led to this. I believe there was a time where his father had another son and named him the same name. So imagine now, Craig, he's Thomas and there's another Thomas, right? And they were close in age. So they almost would have been in the same school together at the same time. So I had only found this out. My parents didn't make a big deal about it. I only found it because I found his baby book. And obviously the name didn't match. So I asked my mother and she told me, and I was pretty young when she had told me that, and she asked me not to say anything, and I never did. I never brought it up actually until that moment. In fact, that was actually after this kind of started to happen. I actually told Chris. He had no idea. There was always a little bit of questions growing up, like, hey, why does he look a tad bit different? His hair was a little bit darker. Chris and I look a lot like we have a sister as well. So we all kind of resemble each other. The other thing was, why wouldn't he have been Peter? My father's Peter. Wouldn't he have been Peter? He'd been the oldest son. But nothing where anybody really pries. So whether they knew or didn't know it, and my parents didn't make a big deal about it. We were all the same. They treated all their children the same. They made us all feel equal. We all had. So I had always kind of let some of his behavior before all this go because of that reason, because of the idea of, now I got to be honest with you, my father is a phenomenal man. And I'm not just saying that, I mean that. He treated him the way he treated the rest of us. In fact, Tommy's father ended up passing away. My father said, listen, I'll take you to the funeral. I'll go with you. And he said, I don't need to go because you're my father. So I believe some of what Tommy had going on in his life, I can't tell you. He never fully told us why. He never gave us a reason. I'm sure finances is some of it. I mean, again, there was no money left. So we could never figure out what he spent all that money on. So there was a really severed relationship between his wife and myself and his children. Unfortunately, that's what happens. Like you said, family goes, has to choose to some degree. So I can't tell you what was in his mindset. I can tell you what I think, and I kind of gave you some of that background. I could never, he would never be honest that way. It would have been nice to know and said, hey, listen, the only thing that we were able to come up with was that he had a real hate for me that I never really knew. He had a real hate for me in the fact that growing up, apparently he wanted to be the same as Chris and I. He wanted to be no different than Chris and I, which he was never treated differently, but he, for some reason, felt that. I mean, Craig, this is crazy, but I remember I wasn't a great student. And I wasn't a terrible student, but I wasn't a great student. I really didn't like to do school that much. And I remember my parents, working with me on projects or whatever, putting my book bag, getting there the next day, and it wasn't there. And I remember going home multiple times. My mom saying, I don't understand what happened. I'm like, I don't know. I put it in my book bag. I showed up, and I went to a Catholic school. So the nuns, they couldn't hit you anymore. But my mom would, she actually stopped picking me up from school because every time they say, Mrs. DelBorrello, can I see you for a minute? And she's like, let me guess, Peter's like, yes. So I was always that student, but we could not understand. I mean, these things would just disappear. And it came out later on that he was actually going in my book bag and taking my work out and just trashing it. And, even came out later on and with business deals, like things that were on my desk, like he would go to my desk and take things. So he had a real hate for me that I never really knew. I'll be completely honest with you. I never really knew that. I didn't know that actually came out afterwards. And that only came out through Chris had told me that he had that conversation with him, that he had a real hate for me that I to this day don't know why, other than he felt like he wasn't one of us. And that's just something inside of him because that's not the way we grew up. I mean, I lived in the same house and my parents treated all of us exactly the same. So it wasn't that. It wasn't like sports. I mean, I'll be honest, our sister's the only athlete in the family. So the three brothers had no athletic ability whatsoever. I'm sorry, I know you're a big sports guy, but we didn't have it. I mean, my sister was the only, so it wasn't like I was this pro athlete so it wasn't like I was anything else other than just me. So so some of that stuff did come out. So whether that motivated him more, but don't forget, I mean, it's a family business. So my brother, Chris, my mom, my dad, I mean, you love my father so much, but you were able to strike him and wound him like nobody else could. So that plays into it, but there was probably something more on a deeper level that we just never found it.
I would say there was. Hurt people. And what you described to me was a pattern of thinking, which led to a pattern of behavior that didn't have a reasonable explanation based upon the environment, but it had a very reasonable explanation inside Tommy's head.
Well, and that's the only thing that we can kind of really all agree upon is there was definitely some kind of anger there. He's since gotten divorced, and unfortunately, I don't see his children. I am there. They're my constituents, and if I see them, I try to speak to them. But unfortunately, that relationship was kind of severed. Not on their part, because let's be honest, kids are innocent. Kids are innocent in all this. It is not that. I will speak to them, and they're still my nieces and nephews anytime, but that's their dad, right? So I respect that boundary. I respect that line. We've never spoken again. We had one more conversation when I really just wanted just to be honest because I needed to know where I stood and where we were financially or if there was anything left or anything that we could come out of this. And he, again, just couldn't be honest with me. So we have never spoken since that time. Actually, I saw him one other time when he's actually led to financial crimes. He actually was charged, and I saw him that day that he was sentenced. And I remember saying something like, I remember being there and raising my hand in the courtroom and the judge saying, I'm sorry, somebody's raising their hand. Because I didn't know any way to get in touch with the judge because I wanted to say something, Greg. I don't know if I wanted to wound him, but I wanted him to know that we weren't as bad as he had thought we were going to be. That things were going to be completely different for us. But I remember saying to the judge is that, people talk about the monsters under your bed, but it's the ones that show up at your house on Sunday, smiling, that are more scary. And I knew she knew exactly what I meant. So I just wanted to get that off of my chest. I wanted him to know that no matter how hard he thought he wounded us or how hard he thought that he had hit us, that we were getting back up again and we were getting back in that game and we weren't going to go out like that.
Dang. Okay. So what do you attribute to your and Chris's resilience in responding to that situation where you had a lot, you lost it all, and it wasn't even your doing, and it was somebody that was, you grew up with in the same house? How did you create, develop, and exercise resilience to bounce back?
So I think, it's important to know that before I was a politician, Chris was a politician. And the first campaign we ever lived through with Chris was really nasty. I mean, at the local level, I mean, you see it on a large scale. You could see where even our last presidential between Trump and Kamala, you see that negative nasty. You see the commercials. But your life, you're probably not going to meet either one of them, right? So you hear it. But when you run on our level, you see these people every day. You see them at your local supermarket, you see them out with your children. People know who you are, right? So it's really damaging because it's people that you worship with, your friends, your neighbors. It's really damaging on this level. So I think we had grown a really thick skin. We knew who we were. We knew what we were about. We knew that what we were willing to do. We had always been a family that had given back. It's part of our mission, not as much as we had probably wanted to. And that's one of the things that we changed. Our mission had changed. So there was you have to look for that silver lining. You have to look for that thing that separates you from everybody else. For us, it was in business was hours or the amount of time we were willing to put in or how we treated our team members or our customers. And this one, we were in a fight for our lives. And this time we were going to do it differently. We were not going to go down like that. We were going to make sure that, number one, that we put new protocols in place. That was the first thing that we did. And then the next thing that we were going to do was we were going to make sure that our mission had changed from maybe being successful and growing, this venture capital company or growing our companies into giving back more. So that was the next thing that we did. That was most important to us because we realized that at the end of the day, for very little that we had at that point, which was basically, I'm being honest, we had nothing. We had no money. The very little that we had left, we literally had to liquidate everything. My son had to give up even savings bonds. I mean, it's crazy to think that you were catching your kids' savings bonds, but we had to. We had nothing left. And in order to continue to run the company, I mean, you start defaulting. And once you get into that cycle, and that's why I feel bad when I hear about people in that cycle. Once you get into that cycle, you can't get out of it. Once you start defaulting on properties and your payroll is not getting through and you're not paying your staff and you're not paying your bills, it's almost impossible to get out of that. So we were hell bent on never letting that happen. And there was times we came very close. I mean, there was really days that like you're watching, you're saying, my God, hoping that everything clears to make sure just to live another day.
Okay, so you guys have authored a book. What is your take on your motto, the message, the life message that you want to pass on to help other people, especially families and relatives that have had one of their own betray them?
So this happens so often. You know what we discovered was that it happens really often. It just never gets reported because people don't want to put their family members in jail. Or people don't want to put their family members and have these battles, but it happens in some of America's biggest companies and some of America's smallest companies. So, and everybody in between. So it happens a lot more than people actually report. I think the first thing you want to take away with is number one, know who you are and know where you want to be. Understand that your life is going to change and that's okay, right? It's going to change and maybe you can't take vacations and things are going to change. So the one thing that I think Chris and I were both very thankful is we have really great wives. His wife, Tricia, my wife, Megan, and we relied a lot on them. They understood. So they picked up that burden while we were in that office in what felt like days at a time. I mean, it felt like we weren't even seeing them. But the next thing I think people need to realize is be honest with yourself. Figure out honestly, look inside of here and say to yourself, where do I want to be from here? How did I get here? How do I go forward? I think that was the thing that Chris and I, and stay true to your mission. So stay true to your mission statement, get that new mission statement. Look at that, understand that. And that was kind of what the book was. We were trying to help people who have been in this situation or are going to be in this situation because there's people right now, Craig, that are in this situation and don't even know it. They have no idea that this is actually happening within inside of their businesses. And the thing is, they don't know is that it's a family member, it's a brother, a sister, a cousin, and this rips families apart. I mean, it is so, it leaves generational wounds because it really puts family against family in a way that you've never seen before. So I think the first thing is to get a new game plan, understand that, maybe buy our book, but understand that you really, I'm kidding, but understand that it's not the end. The end is when you say it's the end. And that's the biggest thing is that Chris and I were so focused, so laser focused on realizing that that was not going to happen to us. Because that's truly, I believe, that family member's ultimate goal, right? Because if that wasn't Tommy's ultimate goal, if his ultimate goal wasn't to take everything that we had and destroy us, then what was it? You kind of hope that's their ultimate goal, because if it's not, then you really have to question what it was for, right? Because the money only goes so far. I mean, and now that you've destroyed that reputation, whether you think so, the other thing is don't be embarrassed. We knew it was going to hit the papers. We knew it was going to be a big topic. We knew that people were going to find out. We always held our head up high. Don't be embarrassed when people ask, what happened. I was very honest with people. I had nothing to hide, because when you de-weaponize something that people are going to use as a weapon, it doesn't really work too well. When you know who you are, they can't use that against you. We knew it was going to come out in campaigns, and they have, but it's okay. It's okay. I knew that was going to be a topic of campaigns. I knew they were going to say that against us, and I just never let it bother me.
Okay, let's jump into 2025. When's your term up on your current office?
So my term is up. If I rerun, I would have to run next year. My term will be up.
Okay. Don't know if you are or not based upon what you just said, but how can you use this unfortunate situation as a positive in connecting to the constituents that are all struggling with something?
Yeah. So listen, I run the gamut of having a district that has extremely wealthy people in the middle, and then people at the lowest end. So I get to see people on every single day in every aspect, or every aspect of their lives, right? So that's the wonderful thing. I say to everybody every day, you wake up with two questions: to be part of the problem or to be part of the solution. If you ask yourself those two questions every day, they'll guide your life. You'll figure out where you go and where you belong. As far as rerunning, I would love to serve people again. I do think it's a job of service. I truly do understand that. I think the greatest service puts on a uniform. That's the greatest service in our nation, in our world. I'm fortunate to represent a lot of veterans. I'm fortunate enough to represent a lot of Gold Star families, a lot of people that I think have made the ultimate sacrifice. So I think me as a person, every day, I think that's the two questions I tell my children you ask yourself. And I do ask myself those two questions every single day.
Have you forgiven your brother?
Great question, Greg. I never got that question before. I think it depends on the day. I no longer am angry, but I will never forget. Will I ever speak to him again? No. And I know a lot of people, and I think you said you should speak to him again. And I think the problem is that the wound is very deep. And unfortunately, the litigation and things that came after that were extremely costly on a financial basis. And I think that person has to be sorry as well. That person knows I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. I mean, if you Google me, my name will pop up, my social media will pop up. You can get a hold of me. If there's something that I did wrong, I truly felt that I wronged him. And Craig, I got to be honest, for all the things I've done in my life, I don't really do well at hurt people. I just not my way, right? And even when I create laws, I always try to think about the person it's going to affect. It's not about my agenda, it's about their agenda. But he could reach out. He probably won't get an answer. But, email is powerful. You figure if you send an email, most people will read it. It could be an apology, but he's not really sorry. I think he's really just sorry he got caught. I don't think he's really sorry as a person, because there was times that even in some cases we've been involved in, he was asked to testify. He could have said, hey, listen, I was a lone wolf. I did this on my own. He chose not to. He chose to, basically take the Fifth Amendment, which is his right to do so. But at the end of the day, and I feel most sorry for my father, my mom. I think my mom and dad have really been affected in ways. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's still your son. I mean, you even see some of these on these Netflix specials. They have these ones even about serial killers, and the parents, it's still their child, right? It sounds so crazy, but as parents, we know that love you have for a child. They wound you, but they're still your child, and I think that's because that bond is so great. I mean, my kids do say, my son cut up the couch the other day with a pair of scissors. Angry, Craig. I gotta be honest. It's a new couch. But, he melted my arm when he said, sorry, but so I think because he's not really sorry, it's never fully ever going.
Let's go back and touch on your mom and dad again. So your pops, really built up the business and Tommy tore it down.
Yeah.
What impact, and probably in the moment, you were just thinking about you. I mean, I would be just thinking about me, just trying to survive and take care of my family and my wife and my marriage and my kids and future kids and things of that nature. But now that you've had almost 10 years, what has been the negative consequences on your pops?
Well, I think it's the loss of a child. I mean, he kind of estranged himself from my parents, and I mean, it's cost them most of everything they've had. Their lives have changed in ways they can never fix. I think he's never fully apologized to them. I mean, he gave my mom some basically half-assed letter that was basically, I think he was required to by court to write. I don't even think, and you can read the letter. She read it to me one time, and it was basically never mission of guilt or basically still playing the blame game. And it almost seems like he's very careful because he thought that letter might be used against him maybe someday in court, something along those lines. So I don't think I think the long term for parents is that they're always your children, but they have to have remorse, right? I mean, we grew up with that. We had consequences growing up, and we weren't just allowed to just run free. I mean, we were pretty disciplined in my house, and my parents were great. I mean, they still are, but the discipline also has to come from that person to say, hey, I'm wrong. I'm sorry. And again, if you had a real hate for me, you could reach out to Chris. Chris is pretty easygoing. He's always been that way. He's always been the heart of our family. So he could have reached out to Chris, and he didn't. So, because I think he's really just not sorry. I don't think he's sorry about any of this. I don't think he ever felt bad about it. I think he felt bad that the money train stopped. Right. And whatever he was doing, I think that came to an end. And then all the people around you that you were so nasty and negative to. That's the other thing. He was very nasty to some of our team members. And I think I should have stepped in more for that. There was times that I did, but I kept saying to myself, God, because Craig, go back to that idea that you're another Craig Domann out in the world, right? Your father has another son named in the same exact thing, right? He's very close to your age, and you don't really exist anymore. This other person has your name. They exist. So I think, but that's where my dad stepped in and said, hey, listen, your last name is now DelBorrello. And my mom fought for that, and he got that. And that's the other thing was I was angry about that because I think our family had a great name, had a great reputation. I felt like that he really drugged that through the mud. I felt like he's changed his name. If I could have asked for anything on my wish list, him changing his name. But at the end of the day, we just found a way. It said, I did let a lot of that anger go, and it no longer controls me because I think in the early years, and I think really the first year, you really have dark days. And I think my wife could tell you more about that. But they're dark days. They're really angry days, especially when deals and stuff came up, and you couldn't do them. And then people knew about your financial situation. So that's where I think you can't let it control you because people will find out and people will talk behind your back. But it's like anything else. I get, it's like when the negative ads come out. Sometimes I'm like, I didn't even know that about myself. I didn't know how they do that. I didn't even know that about myself. So I don't let it bother me, right? I know who I am. And I think the biggest thing is you let your actions speak more than the words.
So 4 boys?
I have four wonderful sons. Yeah, I'm very lucky.
Okay, so 4 sons, my 4 sons. How are you training them? What is the ages of the 4?
So my oldest boy is 17, and that's my son Jackson. My next son Peter is going to be 6, and my youngest boys are twins. They're mirror twins, which is where I get this gray hair from, Craig. But that's Nicholas and Blaze, and they're 3 years old.
Oh, so you got quite the range.
I go from diapers to one's driving. So I literally run the whole gamut of life with these 4.
Well, it looks like to me that after this thing happened, you put the brakes on the family growth to kind of figure things out. And then when you got things figured out, you got back into the baby business. So you got 3 kids under 6 and you got one over 17, and you've got a big old mess that happened 9.5 years ago. Right.
Yeah. And it was hard to explain that to him because him and Tommy's son, Tommy, were close. So it was really hard that the 2 cousins were pulled apart from each other. They went to the same school and everything. So, I mean, you start changing everything in your life because you really at that point don't even want to run into them. Because you do have some of that where you're saying to yourself, you still don't know where those next moves are going to be. Right. And you just want to kind of distance yourself from that. And as much as you think that litigation is going to happen, it's going to happen. Fortunately, that's been a big part of this, not from him or anything, but from the people that were wronged. And you understand that and you try to make it right. And we did. We've said that along the way. We were involved in things that had nothing to do with us. And that was one of the biggest things is that you're fighting cases that have nothing to do with you. You had no parts of that business. You had nothing, no part of that. And you're trying to fight for something. And that's where I think the legal system is a little bit messed up. It's one thing that when constituents come to me, that's one thing that it's stacked against people. It doesn't matter what party you are. The legal system is stacked against you. It really is. And a lot of constituents that are sometimes on the lower tiers, they're going to get the shaft. They're just not going to get that representation they deserve. And sometimes the public defenders and some of these cases are just not enough. I mean, you're looking at serious charges. So one thing that Chris and I decided to fight for was the Innocence Project. We got involved with the Innocence Project. It was something that was really important to us. We got to know, and we got to go to some of their events. And Craig, these are people that have been in jail for 20 and 30 years that are completely innocent. And some of the charges were like, they would take the testimony of a woman who was hooked on heroin, who was like 200 feet away, who couldn't possibly identify this person. And the only evidence they had was this was a Hispanic gentleman, this was a white gentleman, this was like no description of the person, the person was nowhere near the area, and they convicted people on that evidence, and it was really sad. So the Innocence Project is a great project. We're very involved with them. We feel like, but I can tell you though, when you meet these people, and one of them that we met spent almost 40 years of his life in prison, 40 years. He really wasn't as angry as you think. I got to be honest with you. Sometimes we get mad about a Starbucks line, but the idea that this guy spent 40 years, the best 40 years of his life. I mean, you come out, right? Sometimes your parents are dead. Sometimes your children are full grown. Sometimes you didn't even have children, right? Because you went in so young, but they didn't let them stop them. I mean, everyone that we met that was truly innocent, because the people are like, what about the ones that are guilty? Yes, there are people in jail that are guilty. No doubt about that. But these are people that they have taken the evidence, they have studied the evidence, that people have recanted their stories, and really they've been able to walk free, but they don't let that stop them. They realize the best days of their life are ahead. And that's how you have to look every day. I tell my constituents, the best days of your life are ahead, right? So, because sometimes you're behind, but it's what you do from that point that makes all the difference. So that's what I hope people learn from this.
One thing that just popped in my mind is the idea that, if you went to a prison and you watched them play basketball, lift weights, do all the things they do during, like, quote unquote recess, physical fitness time, most likely the ones that are innocent have a different countenance than the ones that aren't.
Yes.
The people that really don't belong there.
Yes.
Maybe the first X period of time, they're angry and, resentful. But after a time, it's like, I didn't do it.
I didn't do it. I didn't do it. And that was one of the things that I learned about the legal system is it's truly unfair in a lot of cases. And a lot of times these people, if you're from certain backgrounds, you do not get the best representation. You are not getting the best attorneys money can buy. And people are not looking in your story the way they should be. And a lot of these, when they tell the story, especially the Innocence Project, and I think every state has a chapter. And I think so far they were able to free like 40 or 50 people that were doing like life terms. I mean, they go in as juveniles, as children, and spend their best years of their life in prison. But tell you, Chris and I met a lot of them, shook their hands, and really they don't feel that way. And sometimes you hear about these cases, people are like, yeah, but they come out and they get these $1 million settlements. So what? You cannot put a price on time. There is nobody that can create any more time. It is the world's greatest commodity. There's never enough of it. For $1 million or $2 million, 40 years of my life, I'll take 40 years of my life. But they come out and they realize that they have some time left and it's not completely over. So, and that's the things that we really got involved with. We really started getting involved with things. I got involved with Gold Star families, and that was something that's truly important to me. The idea that their children have made the ultimate sacrifice, and remembering that we say their names and that we realize their sacrifice, because above anything else, that's what we had. Chris and I did have our health, right? And as dark as things got, we had our health. We had our children. We had our wives. We weren't completely shattered. We were broken. And it took time, but we weren't to the point of where we said, like, even to the point where I said, hey, we just want to end this. We're just done with this life. That never came to mind. And we just said to ourselves, now how do we go from here? Can you, being a sports guy, understand that? Hey, you're down, it's halftime, but how do you come back? It's a Super Bowl. How do you make those plays? How do you win this game?
How has this whole affair impacted your relationship with your brother, Chris?
So Chris and I were always close. We're complete polar opposites, even the way that we govern. We talk about that a lot. We actually took a ride. We were coming out to see you when we were coming out to California. A woman was riding with us. We had a ride share, and the woman was talking, and she actually remembered Chris from his days as a politician, like 15 years. She's like, weren't you the youngest? And I'm like, So we both have the same love of things, but we're different in a lot of ways. And I think that's how our relationship grows. And we both see things differently, and both bringing that to the table is important. We can both say, I see it this way, I see it this way. Then we try to come in the middle and say, okay, how do we see it together to further our plan? Or how do we do it together to make sure that we have the same goals? We've definitely changed the way we do business. We talk more often. I think it brought us closer together, although I think we were always close. I think it brought us even closer together. I mean, we speak several times a day. Now Chris enjoys his life. And I think you realize what you can do without. Although I think we were doing way better before. I mean, when you take a life of politics, as an honest politician, your income goes way down, way down. But I've never been more happier. I think Chris is a teacher again. He's taken a major pay cut, but I also think that he's way happier. I think our lives, you realize, I love that show, Tiny Houses. And as you move into a tiny house, you realize all the things you really don't need. So I think that's been one of the biggest things for both of us, realizing the things that we can do without, and nothing against anybody who wants that stuff. It's okay. It's okay if that's important to you, that's what you want. But for us, we've changed that, and our value system has completely changed. And it's more about helping others than anything we can ever do for ourselves now.
Peter, thank you for being on Pro Mindset today. If someone wants to find you, I know they can look you up. DelBorrello is not a very common name unless in the Italian community.
Yes.
They can find you, but is your book out yet?
The book is not out yet. No, we're still in that phase of just finishing a couple of things, right? We're going to have that out real soon, but the book will be out soon. But if you go to any major social media, just Google Councilman Pete DelBorrello and you'll find me. I do post multiple times a day, but really great stuff, It's really stuff. You're not going to find anything political on there. You're not going to find me endorsing anybody. You're going to find out really great things about really things that are just happening, not just in New Jersey. I'm fortunate enough to be invited to events all over. Like I said, I was just at an event Friday night with Nick Foles. So I get to be with a lot of great people. So I really try to share that. I also have a new podcast myself called Councilman in the Car. I do a lot of great interviews with a lot of great people. So I'm really excited about that. And hopefully, as I said, it's after the kids are out of the car and it's all cleaned out, because with the 4 kids, your car gets a little messy. But after that, it'd be great.
Peter, thank you so much for being on. I want to thank everybody for listening. I hope you learned something about overcoming adversity, especially when it's right at home.
Appreciate you, Craig. Thank you so much for your time.
Bet.
Have a great day. Bye.
Hey, it's Craig Domann, the host of Pro Mindset Podcast. I want to thank you for listening or watching today's show. And you can catch us every week on the normal social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and all the listening podcast platforms. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And more importantly, I hope you gained a Pro Mindset insight. Please be sure to rate and review Pro Mindset Podcast. And I look forward to catching up with you on our next show.